We start actually to think about how literature has value and how authors can be supported in this circulation and this more global industry. So you might think that what I've told you about Müller and Kehlmann is typical of the 21st century. And here we have very slick marketing mechanisms coming behind authors, and authors are well aware of that because we're all quite cynical and aware of our commodification, and authors are no different and they engage with it. This is possibly true, but it's always useful to look to the past to see what happened in previous centuries. So the idea of literary achievement and giving authors their due and recognising their value, the idea that authors might be important figureheads, is very much evident in past practices as well. So this is a monument of Friedrich Schiller. Little bit of very quick background on the idea of Schiller and the Schiller Prize. The Schiller Prize was the first major award for literature. It was founded in the mid-19th century, and it was part of a movement from a whole class, if you like, in Germany, the middle classes, to have their own figureheads that might be different to those of the ruling elite. So this sort of groundswell appropriating an author and using that author to represent their own ideals of freedom and their own ideals of cultural enlightenment and advancement. So the Schiller Prize kind of grew out of that. But as we've seen, the idea that authors might carry value and represent something can quickly become quite contested. And the Schiller Prize itself became quite contested. That a certain section started to think that that Schiller Prize was too elite and it was too obviously allied with the Chancellor and they didn't like that, so they established the Volksschiller Prize. So you have two competing Schiller Prizes by the beginning of the 20th century because, and the point of this is because of the power of the author's name to represent something. People wanted it to represent their thing, their cultural politics. This idea that you might take an author and use their name and send out a message about yourself or your region was very popular. So we have a number of national prizes, all notably in the names of male 19th century authors. It starts to spiral. There were 36 prizes by 1918, 85 by 1933, 190 by 1945. Many of those had to be scrapped because they'd been sort of polluted by Nazi ideology. So we had lots and lots of prizes that were set up to represent Nazi ideology, which then really you couldn't have in the immediate post-war years. So we have a little dip. But by 2003, you have as many as, depending on how you count, as many as 300 different literary prizes. And the vast majority of these prizes have authors' names. They are named after authors, and they are attached to regions, and they are used to say, so if I give you the Schiller Prize, we're saying, first of all, our region is attracted to Schiller, and we have some link to Schiller, and therefore we can talk about our democratic ideals and our principles of freedom, or whatever. And you, as the living author who will come and receive the prize, will represent that, and you will be able to give that face to our region, to our sponsoring body, or however the prize is constituted. Just to stick with the example of Schiller, here's how Schiller got appropriated by a whole load of different interests. They all thought it would be good to be associated with Schiller for various and slightly oddball reasons, like I like the Schiller Preis der Stadt Marbach for enhancing knowledge of Württemberg, for example. Okay, so Germany has a whole load of prizes, and it stands out. It has more prizes than most other places, to be quite frank. And that in itself is culturally interesting because it says something about the way authors are programmed into a certain industry understanding of literature. Now, it was a bit provincial in the 20th century, and as much as I was indicating, they're all named after generally dead authors, and they were generally associated with the federal structure of Germany. Many of the prizes were very small and were very specific. And there was an awareness at the turn of this century that this was not actually really helping German authors get out there, because they were actually being tied into a rather backward-looking provincial understanding of what German culture and German achievement is about. They decided they needed something a bit more glamorous. So there have been a number of attempts to found prizes that would resonate beyond the elite groups within Germany. So the Corinne Prize, which I'm not sure if it's actually still running, but for a while it ran, was as a TV affair. And as it said, we are placing an emphasis on more TV glamour for books and authors. So a sense that we need to use new media and have new prize award ceremonies and indeed award prizes to different kinds of authors in order to fully capitalise on what authors can represent and how they can get literature out there. In 2002 we had the first iteration of, it was called the Deutsche Bücherpreis, which then became the German Book Prize rather than books in the plural. But there was sort of a flurry about what the best format would be for some kind of national award that would be a bit like the Booker in the British context. So really, really pulling out the best face for literature of that year. And they're quite unabashed about what they're trying to do, that they want to extract the best novel and the best shortlisted novels from the huge number of new releases every year and make sure they attract international attention. So this idea that German authors have to represent something about Germany that we can sell and get out there into the world marketplace. So I'm going to finish there, because what we're going to do now in our interactive sessions is think about this, about how authors get out there and how they carry value and what kind of literature they're giving a face to. And this obviously brings in the very practical element of translation and translators and how they work with authors. So you can imagine, and I'm sure Sally Ann will tell us a little bit more about the importance of being a prize-winning author when it comes to being translated, that new books in German, which Sally Ann has edited, when they emphasize, when they pick out the books that publishers might be interested in, they always have an author profile. It always starts off with author X has won, you know, Q, P and Z prizes. And so it's because, of course, this is a vote of confidence from their own cultural context that these authors are worth reading and looking at. There are lots of interesting questions that we can think about when we think about this idea of giving literature a face, representing certain things, particularly with translation. There's been some very interesting work recently about gender bias in the translation industry, that 2/3 of translators are women, but the amount of translated texts written by women is very low. So the majority of texts in translation are by male authors, often translated by women, and that's an interesting gender dynamic. It's a problematic gender dynamic. If you go back to that Nobel Prize picture where we had this skewed idea of diversity in what they told about themselves, actually there are gender problems going on in what authors are given a front within this wider world literary scene. So I'm going to stop there, I think, and open up for workshop discussions.